Hey guys, it's Sarah, and today's video is another one all about the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act, and how it impacts service animal handlers. The main topic of today's video and the questions I'm going to cover are what rights do handlers have when they are out in public with their service animals. Throughout this video, I'll be using dogs as my main example of service animals, but please keep in mind that miniature horses are also covered under the ADA. If you'd like a whole separate video about miniature horses and the way the ADA impacts them, please let me know in the comments below and I'll work on making that video. So the first question I'm going to answer in today's video is, what can someone ask a service animal handler while they're out in public? Well, members of the general public don't have the right to ask anything. There's nothing stopping them from coming up to a handler and asking them a bunch of personal questions, but that handler is not obligated to answer in any way and can just walk away. Now, if the person is acting as a representative or an agent of a covered entity, say a business or a property owner that is being impacted, then they can ask two questions of a service animal handler. The two questions that an employee of an establishment can ask a handler is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? They are not allowed to ask any specific information about someone's disability, and they are also not allowed to ask for any type of documentation. When asked about the work or task that their dog performs, handlers don't have to have them demonstrate that or give a lot of detail. They can actually be pretty broad in their description. So for example, when Bailey and I are out in public and I get asked this question, I typically say medical alert in response. And if they ask for more information, I say, I have a disability that gives me medical episodes. If I have a medical episode, she will respond to keep me safe. That is all the information an establishment needs. When out in public, I typically don't differentiate Bailey as a psychiatric alert and response service animal, although she does perform psychiatric tasks. I find that there's a lot of misinformation about emotional support animals, and because the law treats psychiatric and medical alert and response animals the same, and to be honest, psychiatric illnesses are medical illnesses, and so they fall under the same umbrella, I find that there's no need to differentiate, and it actually helps avoid access issues from people who are miseducated about what it means to be a service animal versus an emotional support animal. This also helps prevent me from sharing information I don't want to share with a stranger in public. They have no need to know whether or not my disability is psychiatric or medical or mobility related. All they need to know is that I have a disability and the type of task that she performs. The next frequently asked question is, do service animals have to wear a vest or patch or special harness that differentiates them in some way? The answer to this question is no. A service animal doesn't have to be labeled in any way. And this is like other parts of the ADA that are broad specifically to protect the most amount of people. Vests, patches, ID tags, and different kinds of harnesses can be cost prohibitive for a lot of people, and so this aspect allows more people who would benefit from a service animal to be able to afford that. There's also another layer of accessibilities that's added for handlers with this rule. For example, Bailey will task without any gear on. She doesn't have to have a vest or harness to know that if I'm having an episode, she needs to help me. This doesn't mean that she is in work mode all the time, but she can switch into work mode immediately. Even if we're out at the dog park and she's having fun, if something happens, she will still come to me. Because of this, sometimes we'll be out in public and she won't have her vest, and we still have the right to have public access. So for example, if we go for a walk and afterwards I want to run some errands or I want to go grocery shopping, rather than having to go all the way home and grab a vest or harness, I can just go straight and run my errands. This is something that someone without a service animal can do without thinking twice about. So someone with a service animal should still be able to do it, so long as their animal is trained to behave properly outside of a vest. On a personal note, this is why I never vest trained Bailey. She is comfortable with a vest on and she will be on her tip-top behavior when she's wearing it, but she doesn't need a vest to know she's working. And this is because I need her help at home. I need her to be able to switch into work mode sometimes at a moment's notice. And this was the best way to train her for my situation. Other handlers might not need that kind of immediate flexibility, but for us, it's what works. The next frequently asked question is who is responsible for the care and supervision of the animal? And the overall answer to this is the handler. When you go in public, no one is responsible for your dog but you. Whether the animal needs to go to the bathroom, be groomed, eat food, drink water, go to the vet, all of that falls under the responsibility of the handler, and they can't expect another entity to cover that. I have heard of programs that cover the general costs of maintenance and care for service animals after they go to a handler, but this isn't really common and it's not covered under federal law. So it's more of a contract item between the handler and the program that they got the dog from. So it's an agreement between the two of them, not covered under the ADA. The next question is whether or not someone can bring their service dog with them through a self-service food line, like a salad bar or a buffet or something like that. The answer to this question is yes. Service animals must be allowed to accompany their handler through these self-service food lines, and they also must be allowed to be with their handler in a communal eating area, such as a mess hall or a dining hall or something like that. Another question is whether or not hotels can assign specific rooms for service animals if they're trying to be considerate to other guests. The answer is no. A disabled person with a service animal can't be sequestered to certain parts of a hotel or be left only to the pet-friendly rooms. They have to be given the same level of opportunity for rooms that a non-disabled person would be given. Similarly, for a restaurant, someone with a service dog can't be sequestered to the patio or to only a specific part of the restaurant. Another hotel question is, can hotels charge a cleaning fee for guests with service animals? Again, the answer is no. Hotels can't charge a cleaning fee for hair or for dander that a service animal might leave. They can charge for damages that they would charge any other guest for. So if a service animal tears a hole in the carpet, if any other guest would be charged for a hole torn in the carpet, then they can charge that person with the service animal the exact same amount that they would charge someone who wasn't disabled. However, if you go to a hotel and your dog leaves some hair or dander on the sheets, that's not something they can charge you extra for. That's just part of having a service animal. The next question is, can people bring more than one service animal into a public place? The answer to this question is yes, but it does depend on the two different service animals. So the two animals have to perform different tasks for them to be both covered under the ADA. Staff can ask the two allowed questions for each of the animals and verify that they do perform different tasks. And they can also evaluate whether or not two animals can be accommodated in the location. There are certain instances where it is just not feasible for two service animals to be in the same place, unfortunately. And these are the only cases in which someone with two service animals that perform different tasks can be denied access. Technically, someone can have more than two service animals with them if the location that they're going to can accommodate that. But more often than not, if someone has more than one, there'll be a dual handler, so they'll have two. If the multiple service animals perform the exact same tasks, then they're not protected under the ADA for public access at the exact same time. Another question is whether or not service animal handlers are allowed to be inpatient with their service animal in the room with them. Generally, the answer to this is yes. Hospitals have to allow a patient to have their service animal with them wherever they and the public would be able to go. This does exclude anywhere that the public wouldn't be able to go with the patient, so a burn unit or a sterile OR would be able to refuse access to a service animal under the grounds of a sterile environment. A general rule of thumb is that if someone doesn't have to take off their outside clothes and shoes and put on a sterile gown, then they'd be allowed to have a service animal with them in that location. This is just a general heuristic, and sterile environments can actually be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Another exception is if the person who is hospitalized can't care for their service animal by themselves. And this goes back to one of the earlier questions about who is responsible for caring for the animal. If the handler is unable to do it themselves, someone else that is not hospital staff has to be available to take the animal out to the bathroom, to feed it, to groom it, and to generally care for it and maintain it. Hospital staff cannot be required to care for a service animal if the handler can't, and if they can't care for it, that is grounds for hospital denying access to the service animal. At the same time, the hospital has to give a patient the opportunity to make arrangements, so they have to allow them to call a family member, call a caregiver or a friend to help them with these tasks. I also want to reiterate that if the hospital staff are able to mitigate someone's disability in the same way that a service animal can, the patient still has the right to have their service animal with them in the hospital. Another medical related question is whether or not service animals must be allowed to ride in an ambulance with their handler. Again, the answer to this is yes, unless the service animal being in the ambulance would impede the EMT's ability to care for the person as they need to be medically treated. If that's the case, then the medical staff need to arrange to have the service animal transported to the hospital so that they can be with their handler at the hospital. I do also want to say that most emergency responders aren't aware of this requirement that they're supposed to have the service animal with the handler in the ambulance. And so I would encourage handlers to reach out to their local emergency responders and ask if they have any community events. That way they can come with their service animal and discuss this type of thing with them just in case. Those are all the questions about the ADA that I'm going to cover today, but if you have more questions, please put them in the comments down below and I will try to include them in a future video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.